Thirumaran Ikambram is a seasoned data science and AI leader with over 27 years of experience driving business impact through advanced analytics, machine learning, and cognitive technologies. He is currently the Director of Data Science at Ericsson's Global AI Accelerator Center of Excellence and is focused on leveraging AI ML for telecom. Welcome on the stage, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. So we are about to see big changes in AI that will improve our lives in ways we don't imagine yet. So the Gen AI is going to make that happen. And it's going to be a lot to talk within 10 minutes, but I'll try to keep it brief as terse as possible. If required, we could have a conversation after the session is over. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, why is this a transformational wave? Because it shares many characteristics similar to the earlier big changes that we have seen. So for example, internet or smartphone, some of the characteristics that it shares is in terms of the ubiquitousness. It's there everywhere. It's being used by everyone. It is omni-use. It's across multiple domains. And beyond that, Gen AI also is bringing in a lot of creativity, and that's going to have a big impact in our daily lives. The rate at which this technology is being adopted also is going to be very humongous. And as we have seen in the last 1 or 2 years, the change that it had brought in. Gen AI is also changing the way we interact and the relationship we have with technology. So for example, earlier we were learning language to interact with machines. Now the machine learns the natural language and is able to talk to us. So other way of looking at it is also like earlier machine was just merely a tool. Now we are looking at machine as a partner, a teammate, a collaborator, or a personal intelligent assistant. So there is multiple opinions about this, whether it is there or not there, and which camp we want to really follow. One camp is talking about this is all just hype. There's not much really there from an intelligence perspective. It's purely a model that's predicting the next word. It's just using statistical regularities. However, it had passed the LLM. The LLM has passed Turing test, and the other camp is saying that like it's already there. AGI is there, and we need to really contain this before it becomes rogue, right? Like, so we need to be looking at where it's really there. What is the technology behind why we are seeing what it's providing now? So if you look at it, the AGI trigger comes from the emergent capabilities Gen AI has demonstrated. So how does that emergent capability itself is coming, right? Like if you look at Gen AI in a very simple term, it's nothing but unsupervised learning plus RL. And there is an article written few months back that Ted Chiang had mentioned that if we look at ChatGPT as a whole, like it's primarily creating a compressed view of the world, right? And very good compression algorithm means it can reproduce with very high fidelity. If that is the case, the compression should be really understanding it. If you take an example of a document with million arithmetic examples, a very good compression algo means that it had learned the principles behind arithmetic operations. So that's a very good algo. That's what ChatGPT is trying to do, or GPT is trying to do as well. It's trying to get a very good understanding, and that understanding really is where the learning and the reasoning capability is evolving from. So apart from that, it's also having other emergent capabilities in terms of few samples to learn, and as we all have seen, it takes different personas based on the prompt. So all those comes from, again, from an alignment perspective. It's able to very easily take a different persona, right? Like, and that again is like two aspects are there to that alignment. One is following the user intention, and also it has to cater to the societal norms and ethics. We can't have the Gen AI let loose if we just allow the Gen AI to follow the instructions, right? Like it has to really look at how does it handle the toxicity or bias that it could be introduced by the user prompts. So moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, any new technology has growing pains, and Gen AI is nothing different from that. As we saw, the compressed view of the world. So whenever we are trying to reproduce something out of it, we are going to be interpolating or extrapolating. and the RL that we talked about, which is leading to this alignment and the creativity aspects, it's going to really create this hallucination. So this is something that we need to be looking at, but it's improving as we see the GPT evolution itself. And the reliability is still something questionable, but it's getting there, right? The LLM models are good at some areas, but it's still not at a stage where we could produce top-notch products with very good accuracy. It's not going to be a one-size solution or one-fit-all, like solve everything that we see because of the long fat tail that we see. The fat tail comes because of the diverse problems that one needs to solve. But at the same time, GenAI could still help there because these long fat tail problems are going to be small. And with some prompting, we should still be able to get decent solution out of it. So another issue that we will have to look at is from a data availability standpoint. As the models become larger and larger, the amount of data we would need to really train them is going to become sparse or scarce. The way people are looking at is like having another LLM generate and then create more data. But it's like making a guess to again learn a guess, right? It's going to be like that. So that's something we need to be aware of and be cognizant about that. And the data curation is going to be very critical in that scenario. Last but not the least, like data security, we should be careful about the data leakage, the privacy concerns, the copyright issues, without which the adoption is going to be very difficult. Next slide. Okay, I'm not going to look at every aspects that are getting changed because of the GenAI technology. There's a few things I just wanted to highlight here. The first one is the interface. The future is going to be more about conversational AI with multimodalities. That's going to be the future, the way we interact with the machines. And the second aspect, it's going to be more about the way we talk as humans as well, right? We don't make single exchanges. We discuss, probe, seek clarity. So that's the way we would be really looking at interacting with GenAI as well. Only then we could really get the better enhanced outcome from GenAI. The second aspect is reasoning. Like as we have seen, as models are getting larger and larger, reasoning is a capability that's emerging. It's again through that compression and the alignment that we saw earlier. So it's really coming out of that, but it still need to be improved. There's a lot to be done. Like GenAI probably alone won't be enough to really get there where we want in terms of reasoning. We should be really looking at upcoming technologies like forward networks or liquid neural networks or some hybrid combination algorithms like neurosymbolic logic to really pave the way for advanced reasoning. Safety is another critical aspect where intense development and focus is going on. OpenAI recently announced that 20% of the compute budget is going to be really spent here, right? So alignment is just one subpart of the safety. There's so many other aspects with respect to safety. One simple example we could look at is when we are talking about RL here, it could really get into a reward hacking mode as well, right? Like because we want to just maximize, and the maximization could be done even without adhering to the standards or the corporate ethics or the user intentions. You could still maximize, and we need to be careful about how do we handle that. The last one is about agency. So agency is again critical. It's basically talking about like the machine having autonomous power to interact with the environment and change it. And that's going to be really critical along with the alignment to really get to the super intelligence that companies like OpenAI are talking about. So agency again creates additional issue with respect to safety. So we need to be really aligned and then see how we can balance this out. Next slide. Okay, so all this is good, like, and as we saw, the GenAI, if you want to really get a better outcome, we need to have multiple interaction with it, not just a single API call. So that means like more call to do one single job, right? So the cost is going to be high, and as models are becoming larger and larger, the compute becoming scarce, it's going to be really big. And should really think about investing in this space, right? Like, so two ways to look at it. The one way is like in the short term, we could look at using closed source APIs, which are much more cheaper. But as we see more adoption and there's huge volume of usage, the self-hosted model could really take over, and we should be able to switch to that. The other aspect comes from Jivan's paradox, which basically claims that if we are reducing the marginal cost by half, it basically means that the demand is going to be more than doubled. So in that scenario, the overall cost is going to be the same. It was done in case of resource utilization, whether resource utilization is going to come down if the cost is dropped, but it still applies in the IT case as well, in the Gen AI case as well. If you look at what has happened in the earlier technologies that we have seen, internet reduced the marginal cost of distribution to nearly zero. Cloud reduced the marginal cost of storage to zero. So similarly, one could expect the Gen AI to really reduce the marginal cost of creativity to be zero. And that's going to really create a lot of demand, and it's going to be boosting the adoption further, and this cycle is going to cut down the cost further. So it's still, from those perspectives, an interesting area to invest and pursue. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but some examples from a telco perspective. Google, for example, announced in some article that there are 4,000 ways of people using to set an alarm in the phone. Just for setting alarm, there are 4,000 different ways. So we can see the user variations one would expect, right? Like when we get into more complex things. So Gen AI could really understand that, understand the intent, we can recognize it, and then help translate and things like that. And with telco as well, as we are moving towards more cognitive networks and intent-driven automation, so Gen AI could clearly play a role there. In combination with that, and if you look at Gen AI as a central orchestrator as well, intent recognition and then natural language interaction, and with more agency, for example, coming into play. So for example, like Vonage recently announced a Magenta Business API, which can provide or expose network slicing as an API, right? So as things evolve in those space, we could think about Gen AI really playing the central orchestrator. There are many real world examples where people have really done bad in terms of working in a stressful environment. Gen AI could really fit in their case as well, like where users are in a stressful environment, it makes it much easier to follow procedures by verbally communicating it to, rather than going through a sequence of steps. So there's multiple one-click navigation, those kind of work is happening right now. And it also helps with the knowledge gap, addressing the knowledge gap when new people are onboarded. Security is another area where it could really bolster. We can think about the Gen AI generating a lot of detection rules, like threat scenarios that could help address threat actors. It could become a policy assistant and things like that. Visual intelligence, another example we could think about, where it could help the technicians on the field do visual verification and feedback and help improve their productivity. Metaverse, for example, with 5G and 6G, Gen AI could again boost the expansion of digital twins. We could think about a lot more personal assistants using AR, VR and stuff like that. So next slide, please. So how do we really be prepared for this Gen AI-driven future? One thing is, like as companies like OpenAI or Anthropic are talking about super intelligence, it's going to become difficult at some point where humans can't really manage the complexity of tasks, and it's going to be critical for having a combination of human plus machine to do the scalable oversight. So that's going to be critical. And how do we really differentiate from these generic models that are available, right? Like our open source model that are available. There could be several strategies. One could be probably looking at company-specific or domain-specific knowledge graphs that we could build and integrate. And that could also provide some validation to avoid the hallucinations that we are currently facing. The other aspect could be to build a foundation model which is specific to telco. And in that scenario, the one thing that we need to be aware of is how good the reasoning is going to be in that scenario. Because when we are talking about a generic LLM which is trained on the entire web, for example, including all mystery novels, reasoning would be much better than looking at 3GPP documents and product manuals, right? Other aspect we should be looking at is what is the right project? Like how do we really convince our management and the customers, right? So we need to be picking up on Gen AI strengths and what are the key strengths that we could really leverage, pick the right project that will demonstrate it, and as well as show the real world impact there. We shouldn't be again looking at using all these large models for every task. Like it would be very like looking for having an hammer and looking for everything as a nail, right? So it shouldn't be like that. We should also have a responsible AI team within the company, which could manage the content moderation and also support corporate or company-specific ethics and standards incorporated into that. The rapid pace of innovation that we are seeing, it's really hard for a single company to really focus on unless we are OpenAI or Anthropic with a lot of billions of investment to support this, right? So it would be better to partner with trusted vendors, at least in the initial stages, till we get to a good adoption and we showcase and reap some benefit out of this. They could also help with like the current challenges and the emerging challenges. Like current challenges probably would be maybe easier, but emergent challenges, we don't know even what's going to come up. So it's much easier to partner with somebody in that space. Last but not the least is we don't know exactly when this Gen AI is going to become AGA or super intelligent AI, or what's going to happen in the next year or what's going to happen a couple of years later, right? But one thing for sure is this is going to really transform. It's going to disrupt the way we work with machines. And we need to be really prepared to handle this, rise up to the challenge. We need to make an assumption that the reliability and controllability issues that we are facing today with Gen AI would be solved in the near term, maybe 1 or 2 years, and then be looking out for use cases that we can really leverage this. So with that, I'll end the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful keynote. I would now welcome all the panelists on the floor. Dr. Shailesh Kumar from Reliance Jio. Welcome, sir. Then there is Azhar Saeed, Senior Director with Red Hat, Mr. Pranav Arora, Accenture, Mr. Anku Jain, Managing Director, MediaTek, Ms. Pratibha Sirish Pachu, Head of Bosch Service Solutions India, and Milind Pathak from Root Mobile. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon all the fellow panelists. It's a packed house, and for a topic that we are most interested now when it comes to AI, generative AI, it's a topic that gets widely discussed in every forum. No conversation on innovation or emerging tech ends without a discussion on AI. And now with generative AI becoming more popular and adaptable, it is important that we have a conversation in every discussion. Thank you very much for this excellent introduction. You've actually reduced a lot of my effort in setting the context. But because the conversation is around generative AI, and to kickstart, I thought there are two statistics that becomes very important for us to discuss, and that could become the basis of our conversation today. What has actually changed with the generative AI and the new LLM models that have been introduced in the late 2022? Nothing. I mean, what drastic has actually changed in the whole process? There are two things that have actually changed. One is the introduction of LLM, making it more accessible. Second is the compute itself and the capacity around that is transforming. These are two big changes that are happening and transforming the way we are adopting AI. As KPMG, we did a survey of around 350 CEOs in the last 6 months. We did this at the back of our global survey as well. And the impact of AI was something that we were trying to compute, because we wanted to understand where is the investment going to go. Okay, and interestingly, when we interviewed around 350 Indian CEOs, 66% of them said that a large portion of their investment is going into research, specifically in the area of generative AI and how they can adopt it. If they are not selling a service-based product, it is how to optimize their own processes. So every organization is now looking at it. 66%, I'm sure when we do the survey again next year, it'll be upwards of 80-85%. The second important statistics that I thought will be important for our discussion is what Gartner has actually quoted. Gartner in 2020 quoted that only 5% of enterprise applications actually adopt and use AI to remodeling their outcome. That percentage, as on today, from Gartner is 40% by 2024, which means that there is something that has actually transformed both in terms of technology and change. So with that context, I thought I'll start my panel, and I've got an esteemed panel. I've got panelists who are transforming the way technology is getting adopted, being familiarized. Research is being done by some of our fellow panelists in their organizations. New models are being developed. We also have representative from the chip design team as well, which is also transforming the way AI is being viewed. We have panelists from who have adopted generative AI and built use cases around it. We are going to get some understanding on what they have seen and what has been the outcome and challenges. I also have an esteemed panelist from the telecom industry, specifically from a service provider, who are partnering with NVIDIA and also transforming the way AI is getting adopted, especially when it comes to adopting it for native language translation. So with that context, maybe Ankur, if I could go to you. Ankur, when it comes to generative AI and the technology surrounding it, you have gone on record from your organization to say that you have started adopting a lot of different models. You're also seeing, because you are from the chip design field, it is very important for us to understand what is actually changing in terms of technological advancements. How do you see as an organization? If you could throw some light on what your role is in the context of this, and how is MediaTek actually transforming the way it is?
I think we have been on panels before, so I hope you ask easy questions. So I'm Anku Jain. I'm heading MediaTek in India. So I'll kind of answer this in two different segments. One is about, generically speaking, what is about generative AI. I think we saw in the previous slides a bit about that. So, and where is the opportunity for, organizations and startups and so on. So if you see generative AI, I will kind of split into three levels. One is the LLM itself. Now that LLM is being written by big companies like Google and Facebook and so on. Now, and that is one segment where research is happening. The second is about fine-tuning of that LLM, and then you kind of fit it into a specific use case. So I'll give an example of being an angel investor. I keep coming up across companies who are using this technology. So there's one company which is to do with finance, and they have actually fine-tuned a Blue 176 LLM, and which is specifically for assessing the technicals of stock growth and so on, right? And then they have kind of fine-tuned this model and made it specially adapted to the Indian context. So that can give insights into way to invest and so on. So I don't know how that works, but that's the kind of use case. So fine-tuning the LLM. And the third, of course, which is the most most available and most potential, which has for the startups and others, is about using generative AI to solve a business problem. And that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. That, for example, if you want to take help on crunching in Excel, so generative AI can actually help you to do that. So it's like a tool, right? So, and there are a lot of use cases or business problems which can be solved through generative AI, and that is a huge opportunity area. Now, coming specifically for MediaTek, MediaTek has been working on AI for the last several years. So our chips, we are a chip design company, so we design chips for several verticals like smartphones, smart homes, smart TVs, and recently about auto and so on. And so the AI engine itself helps. We have a APU, which is a AI processing unit on the smartphone, which can help in things like noise reduction when you take a photograph and so on. So that is about AI. Now, generative AI is a new thing which has come up, and we are very excited by that. So recently, we have collaborated with Meta's Llama 2 LLM. Now, that is the great thing about this is that this will work on the edge, on the device itself. So instead of communicating with the cloud, it can actually work on the device, and that helps to have quick response time, because you don't need to communicate with any server or any cloud. It has good privacy benefits, and very low latency and so on. So things like and what MediaTek has done is that We have our own transformer acceleration engine. We have the own neuropilot engine and so on. So these can work together to give a software stack that can create very efficient and good inference from this cooperation. So I think that's where we are going at. So the key point is that it can actually have hardware acceleration in this Meta's Llama 2 LLM. Yeah.
Thank you, Anku. What you're saying is that you have gone and started focusing on one particular technology and one LLM model. But I'll maybe go to Azhar. Azhar, you come from Red Hat, and you believe in obviously recommending your clients open source technology. A lot of advancements happening there on open data architecture as well. With the discussions that you are having with clients, what are you seeing as some transformational areas where generative AI is being used? How is technology itself transforming, and what are you recommending? What are you seeing and recommending to your clients?
Thank you, Puru. My name is Azhar. I work in the area of autonomous operations of infrastructure. And one of the things that we are interested in is understanding how we can use Gen AI to build a more intelligent infrastructure. And there are multiple areas of work that Red Hat has put its effort in terms of open source components, open source tools, improving models. There is a lot of technology advancement that have happened recently. I think Anku just recently explained a bunch of things. What we are seeing is in terms of how can we create better training of those models. What's the kind of data that we need? So Red Hat started a project called Open Data Hub. So Open Data Hub is a curated data, anonymized, that's available for anybody to use so that you can actually train your model sets based on that. It's actually taken off like crazy in terms of how number of companies, universities, different departments that are collaborating in that particular project. And Red Hat's actually one of the kickstarters of that particular project, right? So that's one area. The other area is, for me, it's about actually getting better observability and instrumentation that's in the infrastructure, which is server layer, network layer, data center, and then user and application layer, right? So when I get that kind of data, now what we can do is we can actually curate that particular data. Then you can provide different kinds of use the latest advancements around reinforcement learning, adaptive learning, and build better insights into what's going on, which will allow me to troubleshoot that particular infrastructure. And then by creating a closed loop model, it'll allow me to act or react based on what's going on. So the eventual goal is to create an autonomous operations model where the infrastructure is telling you where you need more capacity. The infrastructure is telling you where you have a problem and it's been isolated. The infrastructure, rather than us doing all of these things manually. And this doesn't happen without actually automation being the first step of that particular process. And most recently, I think literally 3 or 4 months ago, we announced something called Ansible Lightspeed. Ansible Lightspeed is using Gen AI. So it's using Watson at the back end. It uses Gen AI capability to actually generate automation playbooks based on your contextual environment. So if you point to your repo, to your Git repo, your infrastructure, tree, if you will, in terms of site information and capabilities, based on that particular context, it can actually create different kinds of automation playbooks for you. Compliance checks, configuration management, troubleshooting capability. That's what we just launched as a product in that capability. Now, of course, there's a lot more to be done, but we'll talk about it when we discuss the challenges of that.
Sure. Thank you, Azhar. Dr. Shailesh, if I could come to you. From a geo perspective, you had the data science team, been working extensively on artificial intelligence. You also have a partnership with NVIDIA. Could you tell us, firstly, what is, I know that you have been building a lot of enterprise applications. How has things changed in the last 1 year? What does this partnership mean for Geo? And very importantly, when it comes to use cases and transforming that in native languages, how is it going to impact the end customer?
Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me give a little bit background before I answer your question. So, this idea of Gen AI did not start 10 years ago, it started 10,000 years ago. And when I say that, you have to understand the origin of how it all started, right? So, if you think of any civilization like the Indian civilization, the survival of a civilization depends on its ability to produce, consume, distribute knowledge, not only across space, but across time, across generations, right? And we started sharing knowledge with verbal memorization of the shlokas. Then we created script, we wrote it down. Then we had a printing press, and then we were able to not have one script, but millions of copies of that. Then the digital revolution came, internet came, we put everything on the internet. Then search engine came, and now Gen AI came. So first is to look at this as a extension of what has been happening in the world of knowledge sharing and all that, right? Now we call it, when we worked at Google, we used to call it, the librarian of the world. Now the librarian has actually read all the books. So that is the big transition that has happened. Now it is not pointing you to the book based on your query, it is telling you the answer because it has read all the books. And that's a very big change. From an AI perspective, why this is a very big deal, I want us to understand that context, right? So if you think of AI, there are 5 levels of intelligence in my mind. So one is the ability to learn, the ability to understand, the ability to think, and the ability to create, and finally to be conscious of who we are. Now we have crossed the 4th stage of intelligence, the ability to create. Even if we look at our own children, when we teach them and they regurgitate, no big deal. But when they create a new music, when they create a new poem, when we create a new innovation, that is considered a very high form of intelligence. So I think now we have crossed the 4th layer of intelligence, and that's why it's a very big deal. Another perspective I'll give you, for the last 20 years, Google was dominant in the search engine market. And the only reason was because it was depending on the click feedback data that the world was providing. Very big transition that has happened in Gen AI is now nobody needs feedback data from anybody, because the next word is already there in the document given the previous words. So you can always predict the next word. You don't need to depend on people to generate data to build a model. You already have the data, right? Every image pixel has a neighboring pixel already. Every word has a before and after word. Every music tone has a before and after tone. So the label data is now already there. This self-supervision is a very big change that has happened. And today, anybody can build a very complex foundation model because of this fundamental transition from needing external data to build a model versus internal data to build a model, right? That's a very big change. Now with that context, I want to talk a little bit about, one is the NVIDIA partnership we all heard. Now, as Geo transformed the data landscape in the country, right? Bringing down the cost of data was our first mission, and we succeeded in that. And now we are at number 1 in all that. The second big cost, the hurdle of AI transformation of the country is compute cost now, right? And if compute cost is very high, no matter how many great scientists and researchers we have all over IITs and everywhere, if the compute cost is high, however many startups we have, compute cost has to be brought down. Unless we bring that cost down, a lot of innovation will not happen. So the first reason for the partnership is to bring down the compute costs and democratize compute the way we have democratized data. That will make a very big difference in the entire ecosystem. And obviously on top of it, a lot of things have to happen. Now, in terms of application, I think what Gen AI has done, it has opened up, especially for Indian context, a lot of opportunities, right? Our challenge is languages on one side of the matrix and domains on one side of the matrix. So if you think about agriculture domain in all languages, education domain in all languages, manufacturing domain in all languages, healthcare domain in all languages. If you imagine that matrix, how much potential work is now available to be done so that we can create LLMs for every language, cross every domain, and make that available, right? So farmers can use their LLM in whatever language they are comfortable with, and engineers can use their LLM to design and manufacture whatever they want to do. Telecom people can do their LLM to do their thing. So I think this has opened up a new form of knowledge access, right knowledge, without having to go to the 200 silos of data, because all of it is in one place. So that will really accelerate our ability to further create new innovation and more knowledge. So that is a very big thing. And organizations like Bharat GPT and all are now working on creating LLMs in many Indian languages is going to be a big national effort and cross all the domains. So I think that will really boost the economy in a very different way. I'll talk about more use cases in society later, but thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Although I will, maybe in the next time you'll cover the entire efficacy of the implementation of the model, but we can cover that. Pratibha, if I could come to you, you represent an organization like Bosch, which is not only into high-end enterprise applications, device, equipments. You also represent a service organization that is actually servicing not only your internal customers but your external clients. From a process optimization perspective, okay, what kind of changes are you seeing in the way you are delivering to your own internal customers with AI being more adopted? Are you also seeing some good transformational cases on the work that you're doing that you're taking to customers as well?
Yeah, thank you. So it is Bosch, for example, comes in the category you mentioned in your research, which is a lot of investment and a lot of research. Considering the domains that Bosch worldwide, I'm not talking only of the service, but actually Bosch worldwide is involved in, with a lot of domains, mostly automotive, and then the rest of the domains. But two spectrums I can talk about, like you said, for the external, what we're offering for the external, while we do a lot of research for our internal applications and how we can be, in the context of responsible AI. This is very important for us, with autonomous driving, for example, going to be the next. So you wouldn't find too many information about it on the public network, because a lot of it is, a lot of research has to go for responsible AI. But two easy ones coming from the organization. I head the Bosch Service Solutions business in India. And we have developed the conversational AI. Of course, since you're in the services sector, this is the most easiest one to pick up, I guess, or I would say is imperative today, because no client is ready to talk to us unless they know that we can bring in such technologies and are not doing the age-old contact center kind of support. So, but we did it with a little difference, because again, like I said, Bosch is very, very careful about responsible AI, data security, information security. So what we have done is, for example, built our own conversational AI middle layer. So we don't take it from the outside world, we develop our own, but we partner for creating the knowledge source, of course, comes from our own work that we do and how we can train that model. And on the input side, the engine for doing this is what only the partnership that we do. Considering this, and over this middleware, we have developed a lot of applications. For example, of course, the simple contextual search, to agent assist, to sentiment analysis, topic conversation, which always improves the speed of reaction. But there is a lot of still debate, whether it is possible to give this kind of knowledge that it picks up directly to the end customers. But I think we will get there. What is important is, of course, the knowledge base that we have and how we train it, how we control it. The second, the other spectrum is a lot of investment has gone. In fact, we have an in-house startup which is developing solutions called like AI Shield, or what we call AI Guardian, which is on the regulation, or rather helping companies. It's a software solution, and this software kind of helps companies in two ways. One, a simple rule-based or standard AI or standard pitfalls of generative AI. It kind of checks with simple lines of code. Two, where we have this other solution where we can kind of code for organizations' policies, so that the more proprietary information is not leaked. So completely what we are talking today about, checking the input as well as the output, and have a guardrail. So this kind of solutions are also being used, which we offer after using it well internally, is now being offered externally also.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. And I'll take clue from what you said at the end, which is around AI Shield and the solution that you spoke about. Pranav, if I could come to you, you are an organization, you represent Accenture that has been adopting AI to service your customers, recommending to your customers. One of the statistics that we have researched while talking to our clients is more than 15 to 20% of the new applications that are expected to get developed are expected to get developed through AI. Okay, this is transforming the way software development is going to get re-envisioned. From your own perspective, because you focus on enterprise reinvention, business optimization, what are you seeing as real challenges at your clients where AI is being used, and what are some of your learnings from some of these experiences?
So thanks a lot for that question. I think already, I was hearing the statistic that about 40% of the code on GitHub is already AI generated. So I think it's only going to go up more and more. If we talk about some of the challenges, I think LLMs and the whole generative AI is very early in the journey. One way of thinking about it is that if you compare it to, let's say, Web 2, you are probably pre-Facebook, right? So that's how early you are in this revolution. I think there are very few clients which have right now taken a let's say a leap towards leveraging Gen AI. Most of the people are in experimentation phase. However, there are a few clients which have actually been able to see that this is a fundamental shift. This is pushing the productivity frontier out. So if you think about a productivity frontier, which is for any cost, what is the value that you could deliver? What generative AI can now do is fundamentally push it out. For the same cost, you could generate, significantly more value. So there are a few examples of companies which have been able to internalize that, and that is where the boards of the companies have been able to set a very clear vision in terms of how they want to see this total enterprise reinvention leveraging Gen AI, right? It's a very challenging task. There are lots of risk around Gen AI that are still unpredictable. The technology itself is advancing so fast that all of the decisions around whether to build or buy, may look very different. You make the decision today, in 3 months, that build or buy decision could need to be revisited. So it's a fast changing space. There are lots of risk, but there will be advantage for the first movers, which will be there. Yeah.
Thank you, Pranav. Milind, if I could come to you. I wanted to now, since I've covered the question on capability build.
Is there anything for me to answer now?
No, there are lots to answer, especially because you represent an organization that not only touches enterprise customers, but B2B2C as a domain, which is a very important domain to cover. And traditionally, a lot of what you do impacts customer behavior and experience. So generative AI has a very big role to play in that. And you probably were in the area of conversational AI much before some of these use cases and LLM models started getting advanced. So could you throw some light on what has changed for you when you're now having conversation with enterprise customers, number one, and some good use cases and also some practical challenges that you have seen, which we discussed to the extent you can share to our audience.
Yeah, thanks. I always find it very difficult after pundits have spoken.
Yes.
A product marketer or a product guy comes and talks about generative AI is like an antithesis. But let me try and give a slightly
different.
Would you
want to give a context of first what you do, and then
I'll give a context. So I work with a company called Route Mobile, and we basically do a lot amount of work. So we help our brands and enterprises communicate to the consumer, right? And that communication could be one way, could be two way, could be multi-channel, could be omni-channel, whatever that is, right? So that means a lot of times a brand is talking to its consumer with plethora of degrees of intensity. It could be a marketing conversation, it could be a customer care conversation, it could be an engagement conversation, and so on and so forth, right? Coming back to generative AI, So I'll take a leaf out of him and let me build a context so that people are able to pick up the use case. See, Gutenberg Press democratized knowledge. What was available with minds of few, books of few, became available for billions of people, right? Internet democratized brands, which means I learned MBA way back, I don't know, 20 years ago in Bajaj, and the answer there was, our professors used to teach us, Levi's was an urban brand and Killer was a rural brand, right? Internet democratized that. There is no urban rural brand anymore. A rural consumer is as aspirational for Levi's as what he is today, right? I believe, and I don't know if this is original point of thought or said by someone, but I believe generative AI democratizes time. Okay? There is no application in the human world which has democratized and unlocked time for an individual, right? We often talk of cost optimizations and people reductions and so on and so forth, right? But if you look at generative AI, basically what I'm doing is I'm training my enterprises to use tools and technology and unlock time out of system, unlock time out of people. If a man can do a work in 8 hours, can I make him do it in 8 minutes and unlock 10 hours, 52 minutes for him so that he can use that time somewhere else productively, right? One way to look at it is to say, there'll be a job loss because machines will take over. But I dream of a day when the panel 20 years down the line, I'll be sitting with a robot plus a AI generative guy and he'll be conversing with me, and I would love to live a life to see that in the world, right? As a product guy. Democratization of time has multiple elements to it, right? It has an element around compute. It has element about, he touched about it saying, how do you really bring productivity? But all the loads of this conversation lead to one and only one point, which is how am I unlocking time in the system? Because that's the only finite 24 hours you have in anybody's life. There is, everything else is infinite. This is the only finite time, right? Now, when I look that as a problem, and I give you a marketing use case now, the holy grail of marketing was Unilever serves billion consumers, almost all billion consumers as a mobile phone today. Can every text which reaches their hand be unique, right? It's impossible to do without huge computes on it. Can I show every image? Can I do personalized advertising, right? Can I do personalized content creation, which is, and that personalized conversation is not just saying, hey Milan, because hey Milan can easily come with hey asterisk in your code and it will just come at, right? It's just matter. But can I really bring contextualization and personalization to that level, right? Customer care. And I was just talking to Azhar before. 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, we did a customer care conversation between a voice bot and a consumer. And if you hear that conversation, you would not know that the other person talking is a machine. It was seamless. It was responding to with all the ers and ums and the human interface and saying, okay, I'm at the curb. Okay, curb is not there. Then near your thing, this is a place where you could potentially go and pick up. And it was a robo which was doing that. And it was all backed by LLM models behind, right? So the second use case that we have seen is customer care, conversations, and so on and so forth, right? The third thing which I find, which is, and which I'll come to the part of kind of negativity of that part is, we have stopped doing tests for interviews because all the tests are now ChatGPT supported. To an extent that I have also experienced in appraisals, people are putting all the KPIs and ChatGPT and doing that across. So our appraisals have also become very, very standardized, right? So it's very difficult to now even judge people as to what work they're doing, right? And the last point I would want to say is that I think somewhere down the line there is a need for us to understand that this technology, whether we like it or not, will come. But how do we need to make it responsible, right? And I've been saying this for donkey's years, perhaps, and we can take leapfrog as a country in doing that, which is we are perhaps the only country in the world which needs a liftman and the lift at the same time. Right? There's no country in the world which needs to do that. We are the only country. And when that happens, you can really kick innovation a big way. Just to give you a stats, because everyone is a fan of stats, every third out of the fourth startup today in India talks generative AI. So I think, and we can give a lot to the world of this lift and the liftman world, which is responsible, ethical AI, which does not kill employments and builds around it. And me and my team loves building solutions around it.
Excellent. I'll probably cover the last part of what you said around biasness. You covered hallucination, and there are and everybody is talking about responsible AI. Not many regulations around that. It's still governed by guiding principles that an organization or the hyperscalers have started introducing. So let me try to conclude this, and then we'll probably open it up to the audience on if you were to give one recommendation on how do we improve adoption of AI, or if you were to give any recommendation on regulating AI, what would that be? Maybe Azhar, I can start with you.
Thank you. Before I answer your question, I'm going to say something very quick. I did cheat. What I did was I took your questions that you sent us and fed it to ChatGPT. And
I hope you got.
And I have the answers. And actually, it's right here on my phone screen. The most interesting thing about that.
Can I just ask a trivia to this audience? Is there anyone who has not used ChatGPT? Is there anyone? Yeah. Anyone. So that actually answers the question on everybody is using it.
The screen is
what
open.
you use it for is very different.
So,
yeah.
no,
But that's still 3.5, right?
But this is 3.5, of course. But the screen is open. But the point I'm trying to make is not that. The point I'm trying to make is, despite the fact that it's such sophisticated, despite the fact that the language model was developed and it answered all the questions that you had in a very structured way, not a single answer in that matched anything all of us in what we said here on the panel. And that was actually my observation. So there was something to be said about where that model still is. And I think you actually said it very well. It is actually pre-Facebook or whatever, right? I thought that was very, very revealing. Now, to come back to your questions, pardon me for actually going in a roundabout way. I think what we really need is a proper governance framework. That governance framework is incredibly important to ensure you put the right guardrails around different components. And we need it at all different levels. How do you sandbox it? One of the things that I've been thinking and talking about in multiple conversations with people is you can generate anything, you can build a artificial intelligence machine that can provide you answers to a lot of very interesting and very tough questions. But those questions and answers remain where they are unless you act upon them. And I think if you separate the line between the generative part and the action part, there is a guardrail that you can actually propose to make that happen. So I think one conversation that you said was human in the loop. I love that idea of human in the loop and how you can do that, how you can actually put some guardrails and frameworks and remove that bias or remove those components, etc.
The only question is whether it will be self-regulated or you need an external regulation. But Pranav, your thoughts. And
Yeah.
if I can request all panelists to keep it brief
I'll
because
keep
we
it
are
30
running short.
less than 30 seconds. I think we don't need regulation. All laws, at personal opinion, all laws required, which is basically if you're causing embodied harm, they all exist. I would recommend everyone to go and have a look at this Bill Gurley talk at the All In Summit. Regulation has repeatedly been shown to lead to regulatory capture. And that's my personal opinion. I think, we don't need regulation. All the laws exist. If you cause harm, you're liable for it. So it's a tool like anything else. Personal opinion.
Sure. 1-0. I'm just counting the votes.
Yeah, I think, to a certain extent, what he says makes sense because the minute you put a regulation, somebody wants to break it, put a rule and somebody wants to break it. But I think it's more responsible of companies who are looking. I mean, ChatGPT is fun. Maybe all of us have used it for fun, for checking or something. But if it comes to serious implementation, I think companies can look at three important things, at least in my opinion, or what I have learned from my, the researchers who are doing it in Bosch. Three things that we pay a lot of attention, I understand, is information security, data protection. This must be first checked. The second is explainable AI, means to say, can you trust the source in which it has come, the hallucinations, these things, not just any generic knowledge source or LLM, but actually can you explain how you got this somehow, whether it is a human who does it or another LLM, anything is possible. But yeah, so that. And the third one, I think, is protection of intellectual property. I think this is very, very important. If, if a regulation comes, I think it will also come in these areas only. But if companies or organizations pay attention to this, rather than saying, let me promote it for the sake of, being very cool or next gen, I think there will be a lot of benefits.
Sure.
Yeah. See, regulation and responsible AI are two very different paradigms. Responsible AI,
Absolutely.
big proponents of it. Companies
guiding
need to
principles.
be responsible
Yeah.
for that, right?
Sure.
Regulation is a different
Sure.
question.
So,
I think it's 2-1. She
and
wants
and
regulation.
if you don't mind repeating the question.
No, are there any specific regulations, any recommendations that you might have for better adoption or more to avoid biases?
So three things I would say. One is capability building across all.
Yes.
Industry, people, training, this, that, another. Second is lack of better word, I'm using the word regulation, which is self-regulation, which is can you have a overarching guidance of how people should behave responsibly. And the third element is to be, and this, I'm an absolutist on this front, whatever it is, 5 years down the line, I don't want to have a scenario that this is AI university conversation. Okay.
Sure.
AI university conversation, right? You hear a lot of WhatsApp university conversations. Okay, I don't want to get this into 5 years down the line. We are saying, oh, this is AI university
Technically,
conversation.
that has already started.
But that's it, because that will take your capability of this, like,
Sure.
it's like a race to down.
Sure, depth over
Yeah.
breadth. Shailesh.
So I'll take a different take on this. So, whenever at Google we used to have interviews, the first answer is supposed to be a brute force answer. And then you think about it and say what is wrong with it, and then you correct your answer, right? That's how a good interview is. And I think AI is evolving in the same way. The first answer that we have come up with to generation is a brute force answer. And when I say brute force answer, you all understand that today the way we practice deep learning, whether it is image understanding, language understanding, or generation, is actually brute force AI. Just throw a lot of data, a lot of parameters, a lot of compute, a very beautiful algorithm, run it for months, pay $1 billion, and something nice will come out. That is called brute force AI. Now let me tell you what version 2 of this will look like. The second answer of LLM will look like. What is wrong with it? We all love it, but there's something wrong with it. If you think about language degree of freedom and knowledge degree of freedom, right? Language degree of freedom is how many ways can you say the same thing. Knowledge degree of freedom is how many things can you say, right? So for example, if I say Delhi is the capital of India, the knowledge is also correct, the language is also correct. But if I say Paris is the capital of India, language is correct, knowledge is not correct. And if I say banana is the capital of India, both language is not correct and knowledge is also not correct. Now what LLM is doing today is not LLM. It is actually language plus knowledge model. That means it has memorized not only how to say, but also what to say. Now think about it. We all learn language up to a certain age. Then our language doesn't improve. Our knowledge continues to improve. Now what happens after 2021 knowledge? Every month, every week, it has to upgrade the knowledge. But the problem is language plus knowledge is learned jointly in LLMs today. And that's a very big problem. It causes hallucination and many other problems. One of the big next innovation will be separation of language and knowledge. So that language models, truly language models will mature and saturate in every language. And knowledge will continue to grow, whether it is structured knowledge, personal knowledge, private knowledge, public knowledge, in a different format. And when we say a sentence, we combine the two towards the end. We say, this is how I want to say it, and this is what I want to say. Together becomes the language generation. So I think we have built a language cross knowledge model. That is why it is so large and so compute intensive. The next big innovation will be separation of the two, and you will suddenly see that knowledge part we can control. This is what you need to say, and this is how you need to say it, are going to be merging later, and there will be no room for hallucination after that. So I think that's going to be the next big evolution of LLM in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think my view is, I think we certainly need some guardrails and maybe some regulation. I'll give you two examples. I think one she talked about IP protection. So if if LLM eats up a lot of data from here and there, and it also captures some copyrighted or intellectual property stuff, then how do you solve this? So for this some kind of regulation is required. Secondly, if there is a mistake generated by a generative AI engine, then who do you held accountable for? Whom will you jail? So let's say you make a mistake, we know you did it, right? So you will get in trouble. But if generative AI does it, then what do you do? So that's I think a big question, and probably some kind of regulation or some kind of solution is required for that. Yeah.
Sure. So thank you. I think we have run out of time, but I just wanted to conclude by saying, okay, my verdict or my point of view on this is, we certainly need some guardrails because everything looks right until somebody makes an error and you need to find someone. So you can start with self-regulation, be responsible in all models that are adopted, start incorporating that governance in it. And if everything goes right, we may still go with a self-regulated mode until data privacy bill comes in. Okay, thank you very much, and it's been an honor.